Welcome back to episode 5 of Free Thoughts from Freedom Chiropractic and Rehab. Thanks for joining us. Just like every week, we're going to start with our quote of the week. Now, I have to say, this week's quote is not attributed to anyone famous. It's not attributed to any authors or poets or philosophers or anyone like that. My friend Kevin Christie shared this statement that a friend of his made, and it really made me think, so I want to share it with you. His friend said to him, "I used to be a businessman with a family, but I've become a family man with a business." It's a really subtle shift in the words, but the shift in the words reflects his priorities, right? He used to be someone who focused on business and happened to have a family, but he's become a man who has a family who happens to have a business. Obviously our work, right? You can substitute work for business, but our work provides for our family in terms of the financial things that we need to provide, right? But it doesn't provide the love, the attention, the guidance that being a family man has. So his subtle shift in words has allowed him then to prioritize the things that he thinks are the most valuable for his family. Yes, we need the income, and that's part of his statement, but the thing that he needs to do most is to provide those things that the family needs that money can't buy. So think about it for yourself. What are you prioritizing? Is your family first? Are you making sure that they know that they're your priority? Only you can answer that question. Okay, let's talk about health. This week I want to talk about habits and routines. We've had several patients mention to us that they were struggling to kind of keep the routine with their rehab movements. Some were relatively new in treatment, others had been with us for a little while. The patients who were new seemed to struggle because they didn't have something to link it to. They didn't have a step where it said, all right, now it's time to do my exercises. So I tried to give them things that they can link the habit to. So for instance, some of them I said, after you brush your teeth, I want you to do your exercises. Others I said, these are the ones who had trouble getting out of bed. I said, get out of bed and go right to the floor and do your exercises. Let the pain that occurs when you're transitioning out of bed be a trigger to remind you to do the exercises. Ironically, the patients who were struggling farther on in their treatment, they were having trouble remembering because they didn't have that pain trigger anymore. So because the pain trigger seemed to have decreased, they weren't as consistent with doing the exercises. They all saw the benefit of doing the exercises, but they became inconsistent. Now, why is this important? This isn't just about rehab movements. This is about all of the habits that we have. So if we have a habit of not getting to bed on time, it's a bad habit, right? It's very easy to establish bad habits. If we have a habit of eating fast food 3 days a week, another really bad habit. How do we choose to establish the good habits? Because those good habits are much more challenging to establish. The key is to make sure that we're doing all that we can to make good choices when we're given the opportunity and try to link it to another trigger. So for instance, a good habit. I know that I tend to get hungry at the end of the day. We'll eat dinner at 6:30 or so, and then if I'm sitting on the couch at 8:30, I tend to get hungry again. To be honest, I'm not really hungry. I'm just bored. That boredom prompts me to think that I need to eat. So as I start to get hungry, that's my cue to go to bed, which then allows me to get my 7 hours of sleep. So use those little hunger cues, or whatever the cues may be, try to look at them and figure out how you can turn a negative thing, snacking after 8:30 that I don't need to do, into a positive thing, which is getting me into bed so I can get my 7 hours of sleep. All this stuff comes from the work from James Clear, comes from Atomic Habits. Now, James Clear had some help from BJ Fogg and from Charles Duhigg, who also wrote books about habits, but James Clear's book is, to me, the easiest one to digest. It's the one that I recommend the most. It's the one that I've gifted the most. As a matter of fact, we gave it to our Kettlebell Club this year as their holiday gift because I wanted them to read it too. It's not just about establishing one habit. It's choosing to establish lots of positive habits, which are much more difficult to do than it is to choose to establish those negative habits. So today, take a look at your day. Where are the positive choices that you're making? And where are the negative choices that you're making? How can you modify those negative choices to turn them into positive choices? Just take a look at it. You never know what you might find. It's time to spread the word. It's time for some good news. This week's news comes from Tank's Good News. It's one of my favorite profiles to follow on Instagram. They just share good stories, just stories that make you feel good. This week they shared from the CDC that at the end of 23, they recalculated life expectancy in the US. We had hit a peak that we hadn't hit since before COVID. So life expectancy at the end of 23 was 78.4 years old. Men's life expectancy in that year had increased by a full year, and women's had increased by just around 0.9 years. Think about that for a minute. That's a big jump in 1 year. If you think about at the end of 21, life expectancy was 76.4 years. So from 21 to 23, we'd increased by almost 2 years the life expectancy in this country. That's pretty awesome news. Now, we just got to get back to being healthy, staying healthy, and making healthy choices.